I think that most of us would be rather nervous or not do it at all to give somebody our password or our PIN number or the keys to the house or a diary. We keep those things very close to the vest, and there's very few people that we trust to give these things to others. It's kind of what we're looking at in the first reading today. Shebna, we don't know what he did wrong. That's not in the reading. But for some reason, he has lost his job. And his job was whenever David was not there, when the king was not there, he was in charge. He locked the doors at night, opened them in the morning. He was in charge. It was a huge job, and it required a lot because what he said, it's in the name of the king. But whatever he did, he lost the job, and Eliakim now takes his place to be that steward, that good steward of the king's property and home, etc. So we're keeping that in mind as we go through this a little bit. And in the second reading, it's one of those Sundays when all the three readings kind of really mesh together. A lot of times the second reading is kind of just off to the side. It doesn't seem to fit. But now it does. And we hear this beautiful part from St. Paul to the Romans. We've got to find my right place here now. How inscrutable are his judgments, and how unsearchable his ways. Talking about God. Inscrutable, unsearchable. We got a little bit of that as we were growing up. When we got to be 3, 4 years old, we began to see that Mom and Dad loved us. But then every once in a while, they would take them someplace, take us place, took me place, and we sit down in a room, and here comes a guy in a white coat and starts sticking needles into me. What are you doing? What is this all about? And it hurt, and we cried. Why would these people who love me give me this terrible torture? So us, at that age, it was inscrutable, unsearchable. We had no idea why that was happening. Now that we're older, we understand why that happened. But at the time, we're thinking, why? What's going on here? Then we get to the gospel today, and that very famous scene in Matthew's gospel. And when God gives Simon this knowledge, you are the Christ, the Son of the living God. And that came from the Father in heaven. Didn't come from Peter's smarts. It's not from his deduction, but it came from God the Father himself. Jesus says, I will give you the keys of the kingdom. Now we go back to that first reading, and we understand that's the beginning scriptures that tells us it's a foreshadowing of the role of the Pope. Keys to bind and to loose, to make rules, all those kinds of things. And the church will not prevail against it. He's going to build the church. And sometimes people say, well, Jesus didn't really come to establish the church. Yes, he did. He established the Catholic Church a long time ago. And we have this rock that comes to us when Jesus changes his name from Simon Bar-Jonah to Kepha. That's the language he would have said it in, Kepha. Petra in Greek. Peter. That's the first time in history anyone has been given the name Peter, rock. You can't find it anywhere else until that time. After that time, there's many people named Peter. But until that time, nobody had the name Peter. Nobody was called rock. Does that mean he's perfect? No. But he is the very first pope. In fact, every February 22nd, we celebrate the feast of the chair of Peter. So it's not that kind of a chair, but the cathedra, the place where the bishop sits. That's where we get the word cathedral. It's the chair of the diocese. But here in Rome, it's when the Pope celebrates that, he says, this is the seat, this is the place. And only the Pope sits there. In our cathedral, only the bishop sits in a certain place. No priest does that. As a sign that God has put the rock into our world. That there is a place where we can be safe, where we can know. And that singular ministry that was given. In fact, when we deal with people thinking about becoming Catholic, that's the hardest one. Mary's easy to talk about, even the Eucharist. But this idea that God would give power to a particular man. And after that first Peter, we now have had in our history 227 Peters. Now, they don't take the name Peter, but they do have the same role and the same position to bind and to loose, to guide the church, so that we can walk in a knowing and a confident way. When I was at my radio show, I got a call one day, because it was a call-in show, and I'm Pastor so-and-so, and I believe that we have the Oneness Church. I said, what's the Oneness Church? I don't know that one. He said, well, there is no Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. It's just one. That's just kind of the way he shows himself. That's not the truth. That's not the truth. And now so I think the last time I looked it up, it was like 38,000 different denominations that call themselves Christian. That can't be what Jesus wants. It makes no sense to say something like that. I was used to work with the Archdiocese, and I was in charge of radio and television, and every year, Channel 13, they don't do it anymore, would gather ministers from the different denominations, and they would split up Saturday mornings to have a half-hour show. I think I had about 7 a year because of the number of churches and all of that. And one day we were there at the meeting, and they were setting the numbers out and when they're going to do this, etc. And one pastor was quite animated. And he said, well, you're not giving my denomination any time to have the play or have the show. And another pastor said, well, I thought you belonged to the Christ of the Living God Church. And he said, you had that church. He said, no. Now we're the Church of Jesus Christ Reformed. And nobody knows what the Reform was about. And it kept splitting and splitting and splitting. That is not what Jesus wants. That's why we have the rock. The rock. We have to become living stones, as St. Peter says in his letter. Think about that. You know, Michelangelo, when he was going to do a statue, he'd go to the quarries and he'd look at the blocks of marble. And he'd just stare at them for a while. And he would say, okay, there's a statue. It's inside the block. And he said, all I do is take away that's not supposed to be there. You get these statues. Inside of us is a saint, is a glorious saint. And we have to allow ourselves to be chiseled and getting rid of all those things that stand in the way. And when we walk with Peter, when we walk with the Pope, we will find that a much easier path. And our popes make rules. They really do. You know, like Catholics are supposed to be at Mass on Sunday. Whatever you bind on earth will be bound in heaven. Jesus gave the power to that man, to the Pope, to make those rules. And we're supposed to follow them. But that's what Jesus did. He set up a church, a faith. So let us make sure we're doing the right thing. And I don't know if you caught it on the opening prayer when it said, O God, who calls the minds of the faithful to unite in a single purpose. We're supposed to gather around the rock, the Pope, to bond with others in a community of faith. That's what we're asked to do. That's what Jesus is asking us to do. Let us not be afraid. Let us not be superior. Let us not think that, oh my gosh, I know better than the Pope in faith and morals. It's not there. It's not what Jesus wants. But let us follow Peter, whatever his name might be right now. Let us follow Peter in a closer following with Christ.